Where did we stop in the last class? Good evening, all of you. Hope you can hear me right. Good evening. Good evening. Okay. So, in the last class, we were talking about struts. We saw how to work with the struts framework, right? So, let's carry forward our discussion. Okay. So, first of all, today we'll see the validation support which you got here in the framework. Okay. You'll find that in Struts2 framework, you got very good validation support. Let's see how to work with this validations. Now, for suppose here, if you consider this login form, when user submits this form, you'll find that the form data, this form request is handled by login action. This form request is handled by login action. Yes. So this login action, in the login action, you see the execute method will have that request processing code. The execute method will have that request processing code. Yes. Now, before the request is processed, what we can do is here, we can validate the request. We can validate the request. So validating the request means, for example, in this case, we need to check whether this user is valid or not. So where you will write this validation code where you're going to write this validation code. Yes. In order to write that validation code, we got a validate method here. We got a validate method. Yes. So this method, where it is defined, we are overriding it. Where it is defined, it is actually in the action support class. You'll find that this method is in action support class. So here, now in the validate method, we have to write that validation code. You see, um, let me do this. Let's say I'll add a map object where we'll have that user credentials, okay, hash map object. Instead of fetching it from the database, I'll do this. Users data, let's say. So users data dot. Now you see uh, this map object, I'll populate it with some credentials. Say Harry 123. Raj 123. Say Kumar 123. That's it. So now that means these are the users who have been, these are the valid users whose details are in this map. Generally, you'll have the database, data user credentials in the database. I don't want to show you DB interactions and all here because that is not our primary concern. Here it is, our primary concern is to understand this validation flow. You know how to interact with the database. You know you can use JDBC. A few people have taught Hibernate in a, so you can use them. Yeah. So now I have to check whether that username, the user supplied username, he is in this field, username field, and user supplied password is in this password field. Now we have to search for that username. So in the map, you got a method, right? The username is a key here. To search for the key, use contains key method. Okay. Yes. So if it is true, that means if that username is available, that means the user is a valid user. But now we have to check for that password, right? Now password is a value. So I'll try to fetch the password associated to that user from that map. user data dot get username. So if we call this get method and pass it username, so what it does, it returns the value which is nothing but the password associated to that username. We'll compare it with the password supplied by the user equals of password. This way. So you see on the map I'm calling get method and passing username. Okay. So if now get method, what it does, it returns the password which is nothing but a value associated to this username. Okay, and we are comparing it with the user supplied password. That's it. Okay, are you people able to hear me? Okay, others are able to hear me, right? Okay. Okay, uh, just a second. So now if these two conditions are true, if these two conditions are true, then I can say the user is valid. Okay, yes. So or else actually we can write this complete code in a single line as well, right? Percent, right? Validated successfully, else invalid user. Now if the user is invalid, if the user is not a valid user, then how will you report this validation error to the framework? Now, we know that user is not valid, but you know what? Here we need to also report this validation error to the framework. Okay, yes. So how will you report it? Let's see. Yeah. For that, we'll use this method. Uh, Add field error. So actually, what we can do is, yes, this is what I wanted to show you people. So if we validate or if you check for these two conditions at once, then there will be a problem. What is the problem? You'll find that uh, we cannot check whether the username is, we don't know whether the username is invalid or password is invalid in this approach. Am I right? So, but okay, now we can take this. What I'll do is, a better approach is to have these conditions to check for this username and password separately itself. For suppose I'll do this. Username is valid, and then we'll separately check for password. Okay, yes. So now username. You see, if there is any validation error, then we can separately report this validation error that for the username we have a problem now. For the username we have a problem. So I would like to print an error message now. Okay, yes. I'd like to print an error message. Say invalid username. Similarly, okay, if password is valid, fine. Then I'll print, simply I'll print password is valid. Else I'll report a validation error for that particular password. Invalid password. That's it. Okay. So this is what we need to do. Yes. Now, one important thing. So if there is validation error, then we need to display the input JSP again, right? Which one is the input JSP here in our case? Login page. You have to make sure that this login page is invoked again. Yes. So how can we do this? Uh, what we need to do is, yes, that's right. So we don't need to write any flow, any code to describe that flow. Okay. All you need to do is, whenever you're using validations, remember one thing: always add this result with the name inputs. Add a result with the name input, and that input should be referring to that input JSP, login.jsp. In case of validation error, which JSP you want to display, that JSP, okay, you will configure it here. That's it. Please make a note of it. Please make a note of it, all of you. So whenever you got validations, make sure that you configure a result with the name input, which should be referring to the input JSP, which should be displayed. So input JSP, sorry, not input JSP. You have to configure the result with the name input, and it should be referring to the, yes, JSP, which is supposed to be displayed. It should be referring to the JSP, which is supposed to be displayed if there are any validations, if there is any validation error. So that result input should be referring to the JSP page, which has to be displayed in case of any validation errors. Okay. So in case of any validation errors, the JSP which you want to display, that JSP name you have to configure it here. That's it. That's all you need to do. Okay. Now we want that error message to be displayed here in this login JSP, right? So when this JSP is invoked, so that error details should be displayed. How can we display that error details? So we don't need to write any code explicitly to display that error details, your error message. Okay. So let's see. We'll test it once. I'll deploy this application on the server. Okay. Now we'll access that login JSP page. Okay. If at all, if the user is valid, now let's see what happens. I'll click on login. So everything goes fine. Okay. For suppose user is not valid, I'll clear the console. The username is valid, but password is not valid, let's say. This time I'll click on login. You see, invalid password, and you got a message which is displayed exactly on top of this password field here. Yes. So this way, you see, we can validate that request. So actually, where is that code written to display that error message? How is that error message displayed here? But actually, we are not writing any code explicitly. That means, okay, that error message, what error message you want to display, only that details, that error message, we are passing it to that add field error method. But displaying that error message in the in this in this page, who's taking care of it? Here, there should be some sort of code written to display that error message, right? Hope you understood my question. You know, you will find that that error message is displayed by this tags itself. We are using this struts tags, right? Text field tag, password tag. So this tags itself will take care of displaying those messages. Okay, this tags itself will take care of displaying those error messages. Okay, please make a note of it. The struts tags itself will take care of, they will the struts tags itself will display the error messages. Okay, so now you see we got a very good validation support here in the struts, right? You see, we don't need to write any code to deal with this flow, right? If there is any validation error, now you see the execute method is not invoked. Instead, you will find that the input JSP is displayed, and not only that input JSP is displayed, but also you'll find that here that error message is passed on to that input JSP. So all such things are taken care by the framework. That is one of the advantages of using this framework here. Yes. Okay. Yes. Fine. So this kind of support, you see, is provided by the framework. Now the the validation support, it won't stop here, but you got more than this. There is more than this. um, you know, you'll find that for writing the custom validation code, you'll be using this validate method. For writing the custom validation code, that means our own validation code, user defined validation code, we'll be using this validate method. Yes, but you know, when we talk about web applications, you'll have some common validations, very regular uh, validations which we need to do. The most common validations, yes, what will be the most common validations generally which we do? Yes, yes. What are the most common validations which you come across? Come on, you might have visited lot of online sites, right? What sort of validations you came across in the web, in username? Okay, and okay, email ID, email address validation. Yeah, checking whether the given email address is valid or not. Yes, and what else? This indicates that you're not keen observers. Um, the most common validation, the other one is mandatory fields. Am I right? Mandatory fields. Checking whether, making sure that the user will supply the data or type in the data for a particular field. Mandatory fields. All right. You'll have some mandatory fields. Yes. So length validations. Length, min length, maximum length, performing such validations. Okay. So you see, these are the validations generally which we'll be doing. You know, for such common validations, for such common validations, we got the support in the framework to perform the most common validations. Okay, for regular validations, you have the support in the framework. That means we don't need to explicitly write any code for such validations. Already, you got built-in support in the framework. Checking for mandatory fields, checking that length, email address. Already, we got the support in the framework. Now let's make use of that inbuilt support provided by the framework. So if you want to use that or if you want to apply that predefined validations or use that validations, predefined validations, then we need to create a separate configuration file here. Okay. Now we have this login action associated to that login form. We got login action class associated to that login form, right? Yes. So what we'll do is here we are going to create an XML file whose name starts with that action class name itself. Okay. Now, for suppose if you want to configure the validations for that login action which is associated to that particular login form. So you need to create an XML file whose name starts with this login action name itself, login action class name itself. So here in this package itself, you'll add it. You see, I'm creating an XML file. In this XML file, I'm going to configure that validation rules. This XML file name should start with login action class name, followed by validate. Okay. This is the name which we are supposed to use. Okay. Yeah, just a second, please. Yeah, I'm sorry. So it should be validation. So the naming convention is important. You need to follow this naming convention. What is the naming convention? You see, this XML file which you're creating here, the name of that XML file, it should start with that action class name. Okay. So which action class fields you want to validate? Which action class fields you want to validate? So that action class name should be given to this XML file. Not just action class name, followed by hyphen validation. You should have a suffix hyphen validation. Hyphen validation. Yes. Okay. Yes. That is mandatory. Hyphen validation. Okay, yes, this is what we need to do. Yeah, now you can click on finish. So we got this XML file. Now what to do with this XML file? So we have to configure that validation rules here. You have to configure the validation rules. So, but before that, you go to the struts blank application. You have the struts blank application, right? So in the last class, I was talking about it. Where you will find this struts blank application? Who's providing this struts blank application? Yes. Yes, struts framework is providing it. And you see, you should see that struts blank application in the zip file which you have downloaded for the libraries. If you download full distribution in that zip file which you will extract, you should see that struts blank application. Under the apps folder you will find it. Okay. Yes. So open the struts blank application. You see under the apps you have the struts blank. Open it, and you have the source folder. Open the source folder. You have Java folder. Under the Java folder you have examples. Under the examples you see you'll find this example file, login validation. So open this login validation file. This is an example validation XML file. So you can copy this doc type. Okay, copy the doc type here. Just copy the doc type. That means the first 3 lines. Copy the first 3 lines. Sorry, and paste it here. Yes. Okay. This is what you need to do. So if you want, you can remember, you can type it explicitly, but no one will give you any award for this. So moreover, you may end up making some mistakes. Yes. Okay. So next, here, now we can configure that validation rules. Which fields you want to validate? We can configure that fields here. Let's try to do that. For suppose I want to make sure that this username and password fields are mandatory fields. I want to make that username and password fields mandatory. What to do? So use this validators element. So this validators element will be the root element of this XML file. Validator element will be the root element of this XML file. Yes. In the validator element itself, you'll configure that field. So username, validator, type required string, message username is required. That's it. So what does this means exactly here? So here it indicates that that field username for that field username we are adding the validation role. So what is the validation role? We are specifying that validation role using this field validator. You see the type it indicates that validator role, validation role. So what is that validation role here? So the validation role is required string. That means it indicates that yes, we should provide the username. So username is mandatory. That is what it indicates. Username is mandatory. Yes. And what if there is any validation error? So what message should be displayed for the validation error? Even we have configured that details. You see, username is required. That's it. Okay. Similarly, we can also add the validation rules for the other fields. You have for each field you have to um, use this field element. Okay, for each field use this field element. Password. So password is required. That's it. Okay. So let's now do we need to configure this XML file details or provide this XML file details to the framework? I can say not needed. Okay, so we don't need to provide this XML file details to the framework. How the framework will identify this XML file then? You know, that naming convention itself which you're following, the name of that XML file, see it starts with the action class name, right? That name of the XML file, it starts with action class name. That itself indicates that this XML file, validation XML file, is for login action. So it will be loaded by the framework, and it will read that validation rules which you have configured, and accordingly it will apply that validation rules to these fields. Yes, that's it. Okay. Yeah. So let's deploy this application on the server. So we got this login page. Now, actually, I won't provide the username. Okay, password as well. Click on login. There is some issue. Just a second. Line number 28. Mm, Let me just redeploy this application once. Okay. I feel like this changes which we made, they're not uploaded, published. Just a second. Okay. Yes, as per my understanding, you see this XML file is not getting loaded. It is not checking for that mandatory field. That is what is happening here. Okay. Mm, login action. There is no typo mistakes. Okay, first let me at least check for that username field. Let me open the Stormcat server. Okay. For some reason, actually, this validation rules which you are applying, uh, it's not loading it. There is some issue. Oh, let me just check this. Mm, okay, let me do this. Let me comment this. Okay, actually, whether it is working or not. First I would like to do this. I'll comment this validate method. Okay, it says null pointer exception, that means we are not checking for once. I'm sorry, I guess I got it wrong. I've removed that validate method. So because that username is not available, maybe that is causing the problem. Let me see. We're not supplying it. Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is working. The only thing is when it goes to that validate method, now I got it. When it goes to the validate method, in the validate method, what I'm trying to do is trying to read that username, but user didn't supply that username, right? User didn't provide that username. Yes. So that means that username field will be null. On the null reference, if you're calling any method, then it will be a null pointer exception, right? So that's a problem. So we need to correct our code here. So here you'll get this issue. That means we have to make sure that the username is not null. If username is not null, not equal to null, then only we have to use that username to read that password and validate the password. Okay, this is one additional condition which we need to add. Okay, that's it. Okay, so now let's try to test this code. Now, well, I'll add that validation rule for password as well. Okay, okay. Click on login. Line number 29. Still have the issue. Null pointer exception now. Just a second. If username is not null, okay, add this condition also. Sorry, what is it? Password not null. We forgot password. Password also should not be null, right? If username is not null and if the password is also not null, okay, In this case, then only we should check for that password. Yes. Okay. Now I'll not provide anything. Click on login. Still null pointer exception. Huh? No, this is not possible. Both the conditions, if it is not null, that means if it is true, and password is also not null, that means the user didn't provide the password. Sorry, if user provided the password, it is not null. Okay, the condition is fine here, right? Yeah. So the control should not enter into this loop, into this block here, right? Okay, let me just check once. Control should not go into that block now, into that if condition, right? Okay, no. Am I doing anything wrong here? I'm using and, that means both the conditions should be satisfied. So these two conditions will be true only if user has provided both the username and username as well as password, right? Yes. So this condition should, that line number 29 should not execute. Anyways, okay. My goodness. Okay, still we have the same issue. Username is not equal to null. Then only the control will enter into this loop. Shall we add this condition again? If password not equal to null. Okay. If password not equal to null, I'll add this condition separately here. Okay. Then only we'll read that password. Line number 31 now. This line is executing. It says null pointer exception. Okay. If the password is null, but why it will enter into this condition here? I'm not getting this point. Password is null, right? If it is null, this condition should fail. Okay, I'm sorry. I got this point. You got the point? I'm sorry. I'm not thinking about that. But I got the point. Did anyone get this point? But why it is not? Why it is entering into this condition? That's the problem. Should not. No. Even no. You see, both username and password should be null, right? We will print them. We didn't provide anything. What should be the username? Null. What should be the password? Null. Both should be null, right? If they are null, this condition should fail. Okay, yeah, this is what happens. That is the problem. I got the point. Sorry, almost forgot this point. Can you tell me what happened here? Now, by looking at that screen, can you tell me what's the issue? Yes, that means actually, sorry, I almost forgot this point. Actually, what the framework does is, if we don't provide any username or password, so it just adds a blank space here. That's it. It's not assigning null. Null is not assigned here. Okay. So I was checking for null, but not for the space. That's the problem. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Okay. So what to do now? So that means we need to add one more condition: username not equal to space as well. Okay. Yes. Or username dot length. Oh, not length. Length. Again, you'll get some issues. Okay. Username not equal to blank space. Okay. Now let me add this condition also. Okay. Fine. So let's see. Okay. So blank space in the sense, sorry, add the space. Okay. One space, single space. Uh, Still, we have the table. What exactly it is populating? Let me just check once. We'll check that length. Not necessary. That is not the problem here. Length. We'll check for that length once. Double ampersand or single ampersand, it doesn't matter actually. Earlier I was just using it. I'll check for that length. Let's see what will be the length here. It's 0. Okay. That means we can go with this length here. It is not even taking space. We can go with this length. Okay. Yeah. So I'll add that length. Dot length greater than 0. Yes. Greater than 0. Okay. Yes. And one more validation, what you need to add it here. For suppose you got this username. Okay, fine. Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. Add that length. Password should be greater than 0. Then only it should be true, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It says password is required. And username it says invalid because that username, so it didn't found in that map. Okay. It didn't find that username in the map. Yes. So sorry, my bad. So actually in some frameworks, in other frameworks it returns null. So I just got carried away. So I was checking for null. That's it. But actually here it won't be null. That is a point. Okay. So now actually we can also check for email address. We can also check for email address. Checking whether an email address is valid or not. How can we check whether the email address is valid or not? How can we check whether email address is valid or not? Generally, what is a valid email address? When I say a valid email address, what exactly it means? What exactly you should have in a valid email address? @mail.com. Okay, will should be there, and some .com, .org, something like that, right? Yes. You see, for that email also, to validate the email address also, we got the support here again. Okay. So what I will do is, in this case, if it is a valid email address, then generally, okay, let me just also update this usernames here. Let's say mail.com, something like that. That's it. I'm just updating them here. So let's deploy this application on the server. For suppose I'll not give a valid email address. Let's see what happens. Click on login. I'm sorry, I didn't have the validation, right? I'm sorry. Okay, so if you want to add another validation role for that username, do this: field name, username, type email. Username is not a valid email ID. So this way we can add a validation rule here. Now let's try to test this code. It might have been updated. Sorry. Harry, I'll clear the console. Click on login. You see, username not a valid email ID. So similarly, we can also add validation rule for min length and max length also. Okay, before that, let me show you people. I'll give a valid email address. I'll give it as gmail.com. Okay, it is actually mail.com. Still, it will take it, not a problem. You see, it works. This time you didn't get that validation error. Anything there should be .com, some hosting server name, so it will take it. Yes. Okay. Fine. For min length, max length also we can add it. For suppose field username, for password we'll add it. Okay, let's add it for password. Password type, you can specify it as just a second. Length type you can specify it as length. Okay. Let me just confirm this. Is it length or min length? Sorry. Yeah. So type let it be string in param minimum is, let's say, 3, minimum is 4, let's say, maximum is 20, let's say. message. Sorry. Invalid number of characters. Something. Okay. Yes. So what happens here? You'll find that this time it will check for that password length. It should be minimum of 4 and maximum of 20. But the only question is whether okay, just specify it as required, not type required. The only problem is we have to check whether it works for this characters or not. Let me see. Okay. Yes. Generally we use it for integers. Okay, fine. So I'll give a valid email address and password one character and typing it. Click on login. It is invalid character. Uh, is that password length? It is not checking it. So yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, use this one. Not required. Use string length. Okay. GTH string length. And min length, actually for numbers we use min, just min, but if it is string, I'm sorry, it should be max length and min length. So let's see, should work. You see, it says invalid number of characters because I just gave 2 characters, right? So it is validating that length as well. Remember one thing, just make a note of it. For suppose if you are validating uh, integer values, okay, if you are validating integers, numbers, and you want to check for that length, in that case what you will do is, please make a note of it. If that field is a numeric type, okay, if that field is numeric type, if it is numeric type, in that case the field validator type, the type attribute value should be int. Type attribute value should be int. Okay, yes. Type validator value should be int. And one more thing here, this param min, it should not be min length, it should be only min. It should be just min, not min length. It should be only min. That's it. Okay, not min length. Okay, so hope you people got it. And the other, if you want to check for maximum length, use max. That's it, not max length. It should be simply max. That's it. The parameter name should be just max. Yeah, you got it, all of you. So you can check for other validations. Now you can explore them. I'll leave it to you people. So hope you understood what to do. But one thing, as of now, so far, that messages, the error messages, so we have hard coded them in this XML file itself. But we got another option. We can configure that messages in the properties file as well, in the separate file. You can configure them in a separate properties file as well, and use them. So that is a recommended approach which we'll follow. Okay, so we'll go through it. But before that, let's take a small break. Okay, I need a break. So after the break, we'll see this configuring the error messages in the properties file, and then we'll see one example where we'll have DB interactions and all, and how we can pass that response data from the action component to the JSP and render it. So a few miscellaneous things, we'll go through them. Okay, yes. Fine. So a small break of 10 minutes. After 10 minutes we'll continue again. Okay, so after 10 minutes we'll have it for another 1.5 hours or so. Okay, yeah. So the next part will be also very important, so where you'll come across value stack and all. Yeah, 10 minutes break. Yeah.